So this will be part 1 of motor speech disorders, and the learning objectives for this particular section will be that we can discuss treatments, that you're going to know how to perform an OME, and think about all the different tests that we're going to do for motor speech disorders. So you'll notice that this particular lecture is going to be a little bit different because we do have to talk about treatment, which we've not done in any of our other lectures. And the reason why we have to talk about treatment is because during your initial assessment, you're actually going to be doing some things like dynamic assessment right in the initial assessment, because you have to know which treatments are going to work before you pick the goals that you're going to choose for your client. And this will make more sense kind of as we get into it. So these are the different things that we're going to talk about. So that we're going to kind of 3 major disorders that we're going to talk about, and then you're going to learn how to do OMEs, but that's going to be in class. So that's not going to be on this video. That will be all in class for OMEs. All right, so let's start with our dysarthrias. So when we get into dysarthria, I apologize, my page is being very silly. Okay. The dysarthrias, it's really important. So this comes directly from your textbook, but basically it's just impaired motor control. So the motor control has been impaired, and this is due to a central or peripheral nervous system damage. And so based on this particular damage, we're going to have some issues that will arise. So some of the main causes that you might see are listed here. So we might see multiple reasons why there might be causes. And there are 6 different types of dysarthrias. So we can go through these and we can talk about the different types of dysarthrias, but please make sure that you check Canvas, because on Canvas there are some videos and it will actually give you some examples. And I think that's going to really help kind of solidify what these are going to sound like. So flaccid, or that low tone, just basically means that we're breathy, we're going to have a slow rate, and everything is really, really weak. So think of it like flat, like a flat tire, flaccid. Spastic, I want you to think of like a spaz, like really hyper, really intense. So we're hypernasal. So notice the difference, hypernasal. And we're going to have that really harsh voice. So it's really harsh. It's going to be increased muscle tone. So everything's really, really tense. That's why we're thinking like a spaz, like so tense, so tense. Everything is tensed up. So that's going to be our hypernasality. And then we're going to have that, that tension. Ataxic essentially is, just think of it like anything with an A is like different, right? So apart from. So ataxic or inaccurate. So it's just not going to be accurate. Their muscle tone is really low, but this irregularity is going to be kind of a common thing to really look for here. So that irregularity. Then we have hypokinetic. So here's where we really need to pay attention to our hypo versus hyper. Hypo meaning our muscle rigidity, we're really breathy, they're have short rushes of speech, versus our hyper is really rapid. So hyper, like really rapid, really harsh, they're going to vary in how loud they're going to be or how fast. And then we have a mixed, where kind of everything is just kind of mixed together. So that's kind of our different types that we could be experiencing. So you want to be able to identify what type of dysarthria does my client have. Then we're going to get into the treatments. And like I said, the reason why you need to know the treatments is because you have to be able to write a goal based on the type of treatment that you're going to have. So these are the kind of your general types of treatments that we have for our various clients. So you want to kind of think about what is the best treatment for my client. Are we going to be approaching it with an AAC? Like, are they very unintelligible? And so an AAC is going to be required, which if you do this, I do want to kind of give you a word of caution here. Please keep in mind the emotions and how this could impact our client, in the sense of, if you're working with an adult who has dysarthria, who was a spoken language communicator their entire life, and then we're now handing them an AAC, this could be a really challenging thing for us to do for our client, because our client might say like, why would I need this? Or I want to try to use my voice. And so it's really our job to help them to be able to kind of buy into this concept of why an AAC is really critical. And remembering the difference between alternative and alternate, right? So like helping them to be able to understand the differences between alternative and alternate communication. Your book is going to go into a lot of detail with those, so please see your book for all of these particular approaches to therapy. That's going to be really critical that you're aware of these particular approaches to therapy. These are different things that we're going to have to do. So your book will go into detail. How do we do respiratory, or how do we do resonance or prosody, those sorts of things. But these are the kind of subsystems of our treatment. So our main treatment approaches being those ones that we pointed out on this particular page, and then kind of going into more detail. Because remember, if we're having breath support issues, or if we're having issues with being consistent with the way that we're speaking, we're going to have to address that in therapy. So we will do this immediately when we are looking at our client initially. So let's look at some goals, because I want you to see how goals are written very differently for our patients when they're getting therapy for dysarthria. So this is in particular respiratory or phonation, and this is for coordination. So you'll see that patient will produce words and phrases of greater than 4 syllables in one breath in 80% of opportunities, given minimal cues, verbal cues, or to utilize breathing strategies to enable greater intelligibility and decrease fatigue when speaking. So notice that it's going to talk about, a lot of the stuff is still the same, right? So we're still talking about, we need that percentage, we still need that cueing, but it's not necessarily written in that same SMART goal format. So when it comes to our medical clients, SMART goals are not the way that we are writing our goals. That's not going to be appropriate. And then we also have to take into consideration, how are they doing that day, right? So how are they doing? What's the goal for that particular day? So let's look at a prosody goal. So for prosody, we're looking to get our patient to read something out loud. And again, we still have that 80% of opportunities, and we still have minimal cues. But notice here that we're not being very specific, right? So it's not specific. Not specific in the sense like of, excuse me, whether that's a verbal cue, a visual cue, those sorts of things. And that's again because we kind of have to gauge how is our client doing that particular day. So we want to think about that. Humor and sarcasm are really important for us to target with our adult population. And that you want to think of, the reason why is because humor and sarcasm are a big part of our social skills and our social life. So we want to think, what are the things that we would want our client to be able to do independently or with just a little bit of help. So always when we're writing goals for our adult clients and really our middle schoolers and high schoolers, we want to think more about the functionality, about their social life. How are they going to use this day in and day out? And so that's why you would write a goal like that. And then lastly, let's think about intelligibility. So if we are having a really challenging time understanding this client because of, their rushed speech or their speech maybe is really impacted, we really want to think about that mentality or that intelligibility. So again, 80% intelligibility. And again, we're not really getting into those cues specifically, but we can talk about a very specific strategy that we could use. So we're looking at overall intelligibility, so improving that. And notice that it's for independence and success at home. So this is independent living. This is going to be really, really critical for our adult population, that we're always looking at that independence. How can they get back to their community? How can they get back to work? So we have home. We could also put work on here. How do we help them get back to life as much as possible like it was before? So those are always things that we need to be thinking about with our adult clients. So I'm going to end this here for now. So we're going to stop here. Part number 2 will be about apraxia. And then part number 3 will be about the dysphasias. So I just want to break it up into 3 different parts. So that's part number 1. Please review those techniques. We're going to talk about in class about the assessment portion, and we will go over any questions you have about techniques as well.